This Joanne is already commenting on watching. Very well, a very good afternoon to you and welcome to Opinion 2017. It's the first Monday since the historic Supreme Court ruling that nullified the results of the presidential elections following a successful petition by the petitioner, His Excellency Engineer Dr. Raila Amolo Odinga. And I'm joined in studio by two prominent Kenyans. One of those is a lawyer as well, and he was the senatorial candidate for the NASA coalition, none other than Wakili Edwin Sifuna. Karibu sana, and congratulations, you are part of the legal team as well.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Homa Bay Senator, who's also a lawyer and an IT specialist, Senator Moses Otieno Kajwang. Karibu sana mheshimiwa.
Cheers, Baggy. I'm a lawmaker.
Oh, you're a lawmaker as well. Should we stick to Moses Kajwang or we just stick to Otieno Kajwang?
Otieno Kajwang will do.
Otieno Kajwang will do.
Yes.
Very well. Karibuni sana.
Yes.
This is Opinion 2017 and I sincerely thank you for finding time to join us. Remember, you can share your comments, questions, views, and we'll be going through them real time. Now, on Friday, the historic ruling. From a layman's perspective, I grasped two words. There were illegalities and irregularities. Perhaps, Senator, what does, just break it down, perhaps to the layman's level, what does that precisely mean? Or what was really the contents of the ruling?
Thanks, Baggy. Basically, what the Supreme Court said was that the body that was mandated to organize the elections did not do it in a manner that was consistent with the Constitution, consistent with the applicable laws. There were irregularities, there were illegalities. And where there is an illegality, it means that someone needs to be persecuted for it. So IEBC did not conduct itself and did not create an environment that could produce a free and fair outcome. If you recall, after the elections, we did our own tallies, and we as Nazarites, we were convinced that we got 8 million votes.
You said
and
what?
That was
I hear you.
And you see, the kind of environment that IEBC built is an environment that then subverted the will of the people. And our 8 million votes were reduced to some odd 6 million votes. And therefore, the court said that the results that came out of IEBC declared by the chairman of the IEBC are results that are null and void because the process in itself was irregular.
Wow. Honorable Senator Sifuna, there was a mention that the third respondent was cleared of any wrongdoing. What did that precisely mean?
Well, what the court said is that they did not find any evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the third respondent. But of course, we know that if there is wrongdoing, and you are the beneficiary of that wrongdoing, it is impossible for us to, distance you from that particular.
No, Sifuna, okay. In other words, what are you saying?
It's a fact. I'm saying if there is wrongdoing somewhere, and you are the beneficiary of that wrongdoing.
Of the wrongdoing.
Yes, Baggy. That is why we have a crime on our books called handling stolen property. You are not the one who stole, but we have found you with stolen property. So you should tell us how you are somebody who, if interrogated well, will tell us how the theft happened. Yeah. That is the truth.
If interrogated well.
If interrogated well, you will tell us why and how the theft happened, because you are the beneficiary of the theft.
And if you looked at the two smoking guns that James Orengo presented to the Supreme Court on the eve of our submissions, remember there was a report by our IT experts, and there was another report by the registrar that was summarizing the activities on the verifications of Forms 34A. The IT report, the footprints of Jubilee's chief agent were found in the servers. There was one, Davis Chirchir. D. Chirchir was found to have logged into the servers.
Into the
several
IEBC
times,
server?
Into the
Absolutely.
IEBC servers. And that is why when James Orengo presented the two reports to the court, Jubilee and IEBC lawyers were very strident in objecting to a point where they were dismissed and were not considered as part of evidence.
Well, yeah, we were told there were servers that could not be accessed, some in France, some
if that evidence would have been accepted by the court, we would have found that the third respondent, their footprints were all over, and all these irregularities and illegalities were committed to benefit them.
Wow. So in this case, the third respondent is Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
Just a quick one before we get into the thick of things. Katam tweet, you're saying, watching with one hand pushing the walls of Jericho.
We will soon get there. We will soon get into Jericho.
Anthony Mwendwa, Tibim ndani kabisa. I mean, this Tibim thing is not going away. Now, gentlemen, prior to the ruling, Uhuru Kenyatta did mention that we as citizens, and he was also addressing the NASA coalition leader Raila Odinga, need to respect the ruling of the court. However, things did change immediately after the ruling. Let's just have a look at the first clip where he was urging Kenyans in general to respect the ruling of the court.
Sheria iwe ni nzuri wakati inakupendelea, lakini ikichukua hatua ambaye haikupendezi, huipendi. We can't work like that, my brothers and sisters. We must be a nation that follows the rule of law. Sharia follows the rule of law.
Very well. That was before the ruling. Now, after the ruling, this is what transpired. Have a look.
I personally disagree with the ruling that has been made today. I disagree with it, and 6 people have decided that they will go against the will of the people. I personally...
Wow. So before I get into that, Nick Beda is saying, hey, Sifuna, handling stolen property. Well, that seems to have sunk in. Mheshimiwa Kajwang, I mean, what changed? I thought we have become accustomed to accepting and moving on with the rulings of the court. We have seen President Kenyatta saying before that we should accept, then immediately after, it seems to be alluding to the fact that 6 people just subverted the will of the people.
Uhuru Kenyatta is a case study in confusion. He's the one who prodded us and kept cajoling us to go to court and told us to get off the streets.
Yes.
Irrespective of the fact that going to the streets, peaceful protest is a right that is protected by the Constitution.
Right.
It's a discussion for another day because body bags have been found in Lake Victoria.
Most unfortunate.
We went to court. And he told us, in fact, he talked about our wonderful constitution. I think there's a tweet which he called, in which he called our constitution a wonderful constitution.
Yes.
Now that the Supreme Court has decided to stand with Kenyans against Jubilee, he now finds fault with the judiciary. And it is not that 6 people have subverted the will of Kenyans. 6 people at the Supreme Court have stood with Kenyans. It is 6 people at the IEBC that was in the process of subverting the will of Kenyans.
Right.
We need to place a finger in the right, box. The Supreme Court stood with Kenyans. The few people at IEBC tried to subvert the will of Kenyans.
Sifuna, is the president out of order?
He's extremely out of order. And, one of the things that we have seen Uhuru take very lightly is the oath that he took to defend the Constitution that, got him into the office in the first place. He has taken that oath extremely lightly. He thinks it's a joke that you as the head of state are supposed to be the person endorsing the principles in our Constitution.
Right.
That you are the one who's supposed to be at the forefront of defending the rule of law in this country. But you see, it is really expecting too much from Uhuru Kenyatta. If his conduct in the past 4 years is anything to go by, this is somebody who has repeatedly violated the Constitution. And we blame his so-called tyranny of numbers in the previous National Assembly and even in this one, because they removed as a reality the specter of impeachment of a president. So that even when he was subverting the Constitution by refusing to obey the court order on the teachers' pay, for instance.
Yes.
And it was not the only one. Even on the police recruitment, when the court came out very clearly, and he rubbished and distanced himself from that court order. I mean, so this is somebody who we have very little expectation in terms of rule of law. And you could see that the initial time when he spoke at State House, he was just pretending. The real Uhuru Kenyatta is the one you saw at Bama.
Somebody is saying, Sifuna, Bravason Mkenya, Sifuna, please go to court. We want you in Senate. Hatutaki 54%.
Huyo kifaranga wa Senate ya Nairobi tumeshasema na yeye pia atanaswa.
Very well. Now, it appears it's becoming personal between him and the Chief Justice. Let's just have a look at the clips. Let me have the first clip that he actually did mention the Chief Justice in Bama. Have a look at this.
Hapo awali nilikuwa rais mtarajiwa. Si kweli? Si Maraga na watu yake hao wakora hao wamesema ati basi hiyo uchaguzi upotee. Si ndivyo wamesema? Sasa mimi sana sio rais mtarajiwa. Mimi rais ambao
is there a difference between rais mtarajiwa na rais?
Maraga ajue ya kwamba sasa anadeal na rais ambaye amekalia kiti. Hapo awali
Electioneering period.
This must be the clip where he was scratching an itch. And I don't want to take it very seriously.
I didn't see that part of scratching.
Atwoli, none other than Atwoli, the Secretary General of Kotu, requested the president to sober up a little bit for us to take him seriously. You know, for a president who symbolizes the values of the nation, who's supposed to inspire national unity, to go out and lash out at an arm of government in that particular manner, and by extension even call them wakora, is extremely unfortunate. And we are seeing the makings of Donald Trump in Kenya. I think it's the next day that he went ahead and said that there is a problem. And Bagge can tell you, yes, there is a problem. The problem is Jubilee. The problem is Uhuru Kenyatta, if he gets another term, if this is seduction period, and is behaving in the manner in which he's behaving, you can imagine how it will be when it's given.
I like the analogy. Did you have to use seduction?
You know, two things came out very clear in that particular clip. First of all, we have known for a long time that Uhuru Kenyatta does not understand the Constitution. He has absolutely no grasp of the Constitution. It is well stipulated in the Constitution that if you are a president and you go into an election, you will remain president until the day that somebody else is sworn in. So this issue of amekalia, ajakalia, amesimama, ajasimama, it shows you very clearly that he does not understand the Constitution. Number two, there is one issue that Kenyans are pretending to be blind to. And they don't want to say it. But you see where I come from, we are not afraid. We are saying the person we saw at Bama, the demeanor, the language, the fact that he could even, he was not in control of his limbs, they could do whatever it is they wanted, is inconsistent with a person who is sober. I am saying the person we saw at Bama was under the influence of something. Okay. And we need to make it very clear, because Sifuna, it is an embarrassment to the office of a president. Because let me tell you, Baggy, the Constitution says that a public office is something that needs to be exercised in a manner that shows respect
to the
people and to the office. Was that respectful to the people? A president, sitting president, behaving like that in public?
Just to break it down in probably a language that doesn't have too many legal terminologies, you have said in a manner that is inconsistent with somebody
who is sober. Absolutely.
In other words, you're saying
sober people behave. He was under the influence of a substance or substances. And it needs to come out very clear. You know, let me tell you, one of the biggest debates that has been there during the past 4 years is the problem of alcoholism in Central Kenya. It is an issue that has been discussed among our youth, and we need to be at the forefront as leaders, saying that some of these things we need to be careful and to stay away from them. We should not shy away from a problem.
No, it's important to tell our actually the problem was with our young people. I mean, your suggestion is that
these young people look up to certain offices. Mheshimiwa Kajwang is an inspiration to very many people.
Yes.
Young people, not just in Homa Bay, but across the country. The way he behaves in public is key.
Should Maraga be worried? I mean, should the judiciary in general, is there independence now under threat? Just could we have the next clip and then we have a look at whether really now this is a threat to the independence of the judiciary, because the judiciary ought to be independent. Let me have that clip, please.
And I have always said, we have a problem with our judiciary, but regardless, we respect. But we shall revisit. We shall respect, but we shall revisit this agenda. Oh yes, we shall. As a Supreme Court, they cannot overturn the will of the people. Lakini Maraga thinks he can overturn the will of the people. We shall show you. And I have always said, we have a problem with our judiciary. We shall show you.
We shall show you.
That's a threat.
We shall revisit this agenda. I mean, how do you revisit a court ruling? I don't know. What is that supposed to mean? If you're Maraga, if you're any of the Supreme Court judges, even the staff, what does that mean?
That is a direct threat to the judiciary. And the president's ranting on not just one or two, but 3 going to 4 occasions shows the kind of president that he truly is. If given another term, he will come back with vendetta to seek out those people who did not support him,
yes,
those people who did not agree with him, in this case, the Supreme Court. But I want to tell him to go and reread the Constitution. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court is well shielded in the Constitution. I heard some of my colleagues in the Senate saying that if you go after IEBC, you will go after
the Supreme Court,
giving the impression that IEBC belongs to them and Supreme Court belongs to NASA. Mm-hmm. I feel flattered to be associated with the Supreme Court because mm-hmm, it is a citadel of justice. And it would be, I would not even want to be associated with IEBC mm-hmm, that conducts irregularities and illegalities. Mm-hmm. But the Supreme Court cannot be kicked out by parliamentarians. It is the preserve of the Judicial Service Commission. And the president's job is just to establish a tribunal. And we know that the Supreme Court and the judiciary has asserted its independence. It will not be a walk in the park. Easy ni vitisho baridi. Like we say in my culture, someone is scaring you with a dead snake.
Yeah. I mean, first it was Justice Odunga.
Yeah.
Now it is a direct affront to Maraga. I mean,
you see, one of the things that I have understood about Jubilee, from the president to his foot soldiers like Honorable Duale, is that they are very petty. You know what they did last time when they did not get their way with the judiciary? They actually slashed 1 billion shillings off their budget.
Of their budget, yeah.
Yeah, so you see, even these tantrums that they are throwing, they are meant to be threats, but we know that judges enjoy security of tenure. Their removal, as Honorable Kajwang has alluded to, can only be conducted or, supervised or undertaken under the auspices of the Judicial Service Commission, which has come out to defend judges in the past. I remember when Uhuru went to Kisii, or was it Nyamira, and he tried to insinuate that he had given one of their sons
I mean, it was a reward. It was supposed to be a reward.
And the JSC came out very strongly to clarify that Justice Maraga has gotten there by merit, by the fact that he has been a judicial officer of distinction for a long time, and he got the position, not due to political patronage.
It was not a token.
So what he's saying is like, some of the people, some of these threats, when they are made, you wait for them to sober up, and I'm sure they will revisit those threats.
Rose Kemunto, one president of 42 million Kenyan, but thinks 5 or 6 people can make a decision for 42 million
And by
Kenyans.
the way, let me address this issue of overturning the will of the people.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has said that the numbers that IEBC put out are not reflective of the will of the people.
Yes.
So it's not the will of the people that has been overturned.
Yes.
It is the will of the server
that
has been overturned.
Yeah. The will of the
server. Their server here in the clouds or wherever it is, they said it's in the US.
Guys, Rick Fossman. Guys, the battle is not ours. I can assure you that it's God's and it's working for us. Personal security of the Chief Justice, for example. I mean, the person making those remarks is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. What implications will those have on Maraga's personal security, given the recent history, I mean, the disappearance of Msando and what happened next? Should he be afraid?
When Msando was killed, we said we are 10 million strong. They
Yes.
can't kill all of us.
Absolutely.
Even if they were to kill each of us per second, it will take them a long time to kill all of us. The Chief Justice, David Maraga, and in his opening remarks when he was delivering his ruling, he said that a nation must observe fidelity to the Constitution,
Yes.
respect to the rule of law, and the fear of God. There used to be a drunk man in my village who every other time he came from his Changa drinking adventures, he would walk around saying, I fear none but God.
Yes.
That's Chief Justice Maraga. He
Yes.
fears no man. For him, the fear, the fidelity to the Constitution,
And the fear of
respect
God.
for the rule of law, and the fear of God, not the fear of Uhuru Kenyatta.
Absolutely.
And those are the kind of men we need. Those are the men of courage we need to drive this nation forward.
In the light of all this, before we go to the next bit of our discussion, what do you have to say to our observers? I mean, this ruling is one world apart from a rosy picture created by one John Kerry and the other observers that, I mean, some were even saying that the NASA leader should concede defeat even before 10% of the results was streaming in.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that is left them with egg on the face. One of the things that I want to make clear, it's not as if we had a problem with all observers.
Yes.
It's specific observers who are here to protect certain interests. And those interests are well known. I mean, you know, every human being, if you consider yourself a human being, you need to have capacity for shame. That's what distinguishes you from an animal. I mean,
Capacity for
shame. I mean, you should feel shameful about the things that you do as a human being. Otherwise, you're not a human being. So, Kerry, wherever he is, I'm sure he's been shamed enough by the fact that his scheme has been exposed. I am sure he is not welcome in this country anymore, probably only as a tourist, if the people in the coast and the other regions will allow him, but not as an observer for elections in this country. Because we have already shown, demonstrated that he's not a credible observer. The Carter Center has been left with the egg in the face. If they're here to push narratives and interests, then, you know, they should give up their position as neutral observers
Yes.
and join Jubilee in the campaigns. I mean,
Yeah,
we will beat all of them.
There's also a sense of courage. There's a sense of courage. When the first African state, 1957, Ghana got independence,
Yeah.
Nkrumah said, there is a new African on the map. And right now there's a new African in the world, and that new African is Kenya. That new African is able to do things that even the US cannot do. In the Al Gore versus George Bush case, technology came in and there were vested interests. We know that Jeb Bush, who was the governor of Florida, rigged the vote to favor his brother, but the Supreme Court failed to get the courage to overturn that election. In the last election, hacking by the Russians is an issue that is there. Even Trump himself has set up teams to investigate hacking. The Americans do not have the guts to investigate themselves, yet they come here and pontificate and lecture us. Kenya is a new African on the globe that is not ashamed to respect its constitution, the rule of law, and fear God.
So this ruling has really, I mean, as a Pan-Africanist, or looking at it from a Pan-Africanist view, it's one of those things that tells you that if we seriously decide to focus on self-determination, Africa can really show the way.
Absolutely. I mean, we have excelled in many fields, in sports, even in technology. We have the resources. The entire country, the world depends on the resources of Africa, the manpower, the markets. But we are held back by a few issues here and there. And this includes the refusal by others to actually democratize and to ensure that the people of Africa remains subverted. So it's a big victory for the people of Kenya and for the people of Africa.
And Raila Odinga, I think, captured it yesterday. He said he stands tall, stands proud as an Afro-optimist, not as an Afro-pessimist. Many of the observers were pessimists. They thought that in Africa, an election, even if the standards
used to
are
failure.
low, even if the standards
it's
are low,
okay, for as long as there is
said
peace.
that standards must be maintained. The constitution must be followed, the rule of law must be followed. And if all of us, and including Uhuru Kenyatta, could sober up and join us in this journey of Afro-optimism, we can be a great country.
Zain Kamya, you're saying, let the president stop blaming our Supreme Court judges They are the same ones who declared him a single person who paved way for the 15 million people. Delila Bahati. Hey, Delila, what a name. Okay. I wonder, with Uhuru, if he won, why he's so bitter. By this time, he should have started celebrating if he's going to win again. Now, let's go into another touchy issue. IEBC. They have been, I mean, the order is there. They have actually announced that the next election will happen on the 26th of October. There have been calls of IEBC to be reconstituted. There have been calls of Chiloba to go. So, I mean, we are going, it's certain we are going back for a presidential election. Who's going to conduct it? And if it's IEBC, in what form? Mheshimiwa.
The Supreme Court ordered the first respondent to organize elections within 60 days.
Yes.
The Supreme Court said that the first respondent conducted irregularities and illegalities and failed to conduct an election in strict compliance with the law and with the Constitution.
Yeah.
We are waiting for the detailed and reasoned ruling of the Supreme Court so that those officials and individuals within the IEBC who conducted the irregularities and illegalities, they cannot be part of this electoral exercise. Remember, IEBC is that huge monolith that includes clerks at the polling station.
Right.
We are not saying that we throw away all the clerks and all the POs and all the ROs and all the commissioners. But the guys who committed irregularities and illegalities, once that report is out, for those with illegalities...
But there has been specific calls for one Chiloba that he must go. I mean, NASA leaders have put it in black and white.
CEO,
that they cannot go to the next election with Chiloba at the helm.
Absolutely.
Edwin and I were in the same room with the Chiloba when doing IT verification. Like, he'll tell you what the experience was.
First of all, Baggy, let's even, you know, there is something called treason. If you attempt to establish a government other than by constitutional means, which is that you are sitting somewhere, feeding information into a server, you are electing a president yourself, whereas millions of Kenyans have lined up to vote and you're subverting and subjugating their will, it is actually treasonable. You are establishing a government outside the constitution. So the people who are responsible, we cannot allow them to have another opportunity. Let me give you an even easier reason why these people belong, first of all, in jail.
Yes.
Disobedience of a court order is a crime punishable by jail time or a fine. Now, we were making the case in the court that this particular election did not meet the threshold of the Constitution. One of the thresholds is transparency. And we have insisted on IEBC opening up their systems and their equipment and the ICT and the technology so that we can actually verify, because an election is supposed to be verifiable under the standards that have been set by the Constitution. But even in the face of a court order of the highest court in the land, they actually refuse. We were in that room. We were in charge of the operation at IEBC of scrutiny of the technology. Even in the face of a court order, at 4:45, when the report is supposed to be submitted at 5, the ICT director, Mr. Mohati, tells us that they themselves are unable to log into their database. They themselves. You know, you will remember, we had sat there from the previous day waiting for them to create credentials for our IT experts to be able to access the database. So those credentials were created, but those credentials could not get us into the database. So at some point, the expert who's seconded from the judiciary says, okay, the login credentials you've created for the NASA experts are not working. Can we use yours, Mr. Mohati? You log into the database, you allow the NASA team to look at it and make copies for the logs, and then he says even he himself cannot log into the database because they are experiencing communication problems with their server. I'm quoting him verbatim because I was there.
ICT director cannot log into their own server.
Which is why we have identified that what I am calling the quadrant of evil. 4 people at IEBC who must not be present there. If there should be any election, those guys should be in jail by the time we're going. For contempt, of course, it's obvious.
The quadrant of evil.
Absolutely. 4 people who are responsible for that. We have Tororei, we have Chiloba, we have Mohadi, and this other one, what's her name?
Is it Nyabuti? Yeah.
Betty Nyabuti. These people need to go. Yes.
Wow.
They need to go.
And it's going to come out when we get the ruling of the Supreme Court.
Now,
because if you say someone committed irregularities and illegalities, an illegality is something punishable under the law.
Absolutely. So, and the easiest one, Mheshimiwa, disobedience of a court or contempt of court is punishable.
Now let me ask you, just this is a conversation I've had common Kenyans ask. If it was so, and this is the highest court, don't you think it would have been prudent for the same court to say, look, as we are making a determination on this, we are cognizant of the fact that you did not obey our court order, and for that matter, so-and-so, 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 I mean, you're being prosecuted. Why didn't the court go to that level?
You see, we are waiting for it. And if the court will not do it sui motu or on its own motion, we as petitioners can actually commence proceedings for contempt. I mean, there's nothing stops us from doing this. But they have to be accountable to Kenyans. Because you see, what we are fighting in this country is impunity. When you talk about rule of law, the very essence of the rule of law is obedience of court orders. You see, I saw some Jubilee people yesterday on some local station saying, oh, the president has chosen to comply with the order. He doesn't have a choice. A court order is not something you say, this one,
you have to comply.
Yeah, what is the alternative? When you are telling us, I am being nice by obeying it, what is the alternative?
Anarchy.
Yeah, I mean, there was that remark that had it not been that he's peace-loving, I mean, there would have been ... I mean, undefined consequences.
That is what we call nonsense on stilts. You do not have an option of option A obeying, option B disobeying. That is what the rule of law means.
Mheshimiwa Kajwang, before I get to you, two quick comments. George Onduko, the good conversation from two learned friends. We need more of this, please. Thank you for that. I mean, comments are coming in so many. Joseph Mugambi, why abuse the president that he is drunk? Well, I don't know if anybody...
it's not an insult. It's a state of affairs. I mean, surely, we said that conduct is inconsistent with a person who is sober. We have seen Uhuru speaking on many occasions. So we know when he is straight up, and even Brother Atwoli has said this thing.
Beatrice Johannes, add 2 votes for Sifuna here. I support Sifuna. Mheshimiwa Kajwang, the transmission systems from the Kim's devices, because it appears this election actually was flawed from the transmission point of the result. What really happened, or what ought to have happened?
A lot of things went wrong. One, Muhando was killed. And Muhando was super user.
Msando. Yes.
Msando.
Yes.
Msando was super user in the IEBC environment.
What does a super user mean?
A super user means that he's got the administrator password and that he's got access to all the devices and databases and software in the organization. We want to believe, even though the police keeps telling us that they're still turning stones, we want to believe that Msando was killed so that his administrator credentials could be taken away from him. On election day, these devices did not fail at the point of identification. That worked well. The presiding officers, in some cases, transmitted the image and the text that was supposed to be transmitted. But what happened is that there was someone sitting in a server room connected to IEBC. When a form comes from Waondo Primary School, which is my polling station, they delete that form and substitute it with another form. And in our IT
another form created elsewhere.
Another form created elsewhere. And these are the forms that were created without barcodes. These are forms that were created without security features. We were able to demonstrate and prove that in court. In total, the number of forms that were substituted were in the thousands. And that's why the court ruled that there were significant irregularities that you could not call the election in favor of Jubilee or in favor of any other party. Now, that in itself is a crime of great proportions. And when we looked at the logs that they provided us with, because they refused to give us real-time access to the logs. They opted to download some logs, which had been sanitized, and gave it to us. We were still able to glean from those logs that there were certain users, and I remember one particular user called D Chirchir, who logged into the server, who logged into the FTP server, who carried out certain operations of deletion and upload of forms, yet D Chirchir was not a user in the IEBC.
So in this case, how will Chirchir access the server if he's not a user, meaning he doesn't have a password? Would he be using somebody else's password?
No, the criminals at IEBC, the people we are saying belong in jail, are the ones who left the back door open for all these operatives to come in and do whatever it is they're doing. That's what we are saying. Those people need to go to jail.
And that's why they had to kill Msando, because it was Msando's password that could provide that kind of access. You know, we keep thinking of hacking as an attack by Russians sitting in St. Petersburg.
With some very serious
weaponry.
Sometimes
is you just need some D Chirchir who has been given a room within the IEBC and has been given access, has been given some backdoor to do his things. A central point of our case was that IEBC systems were hacked. And when we looked at the logs, we could see unauthorized access and unauthorized operations in the IEBC systems.
Now, if what you're saying is to be truth and absolute truth, as you lawyers put it, it means then the collaborative persons must be very high up in the hierarchy of IEBC. I don't see how an ordinary IT officer would allow this to happen. It has to be really high up in the hierarchy.
I don't think it gets higher up than Ezra Chiloba. That's why you've seen he's on the one on the list. We have not put on that list some random presiding officer in Karatina. No. We have identified the people with the greatest responsibility. And that is why you see that list as Ezra Chiloba.
And that's why you see the ICT director.
The ICT director is high up there.
Now that they have announced the date, and I remember some politicians were calling out for the date to be announced very quickly. 26th of October is roughly 2 months from now, so to speak. Is there time to reconstitute? I mean, what's the process of getting rid of Chiloba, for example?
Getting rid of Chiloba is not a constitutional office bearer. Getting rid of him is at the discretion of the commission, because he can be dismissed on issues of incompetence, gross misconduct, or physical or mental infirmity.
Absolutely.
There are clear grounds. Chiloba can be suspended at 8 in the morning if the commission so wishes. The ICT director can be suspended at 8 in the morning if the commission so wishes, and if it is supported by the ruling of the Supreme Court.
But Uhuru has said, and even yesterday the deputy president did say, that we are going to elections with that IEBC.
But here is what you need to understand. You see, even during the agitation for a new commission, there was the debate on what constitutes the commission. I remember we argued very strenuously that the commission is the commissioners. At that particular point, Kina Chiloba and his cohorts were proceeding as if they were the commissioners of the IEBC, including issuing tenders. And we protested at that particular point. And at that time, they were telling us that the commission can continue without even in the absence of commissioners. I mean, so right now, nobody is saying get rid of the commissioners. So we are not saying get rid of the commission. We are saying we have identified thugs in the secretariat who need to go to jail in addition to being fired. I mean,
and if today perhaps the commission decides to get rid of the individuals you're mentioning, do they just go home? Because I remember the commissioners, Kinaisa Kasan, they went home with huge packs.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It was a very rosy send-off.
The distinction between the commissioners and the secretariat, you need to understand that Ezra Chiloba is a regular employee of IEBC. He's like a sweeper there. You can dismiss an employee summarily for gross misconduct, as Mheshimiwa has talked about. If he has a grievance as to whether there was gross misconduct, he can go to the Employment and Labor Relations Court and pursue his case there. But we are saying a case has been made out for gross misconduct. There is no greater gross misconduct than disobedience of a court order. Yes.
And Bagi, IEBC is bigger than Chiloba.
Yes.
It is bigger than the 4 people that we have mentioned. As I told you, IEBC has got thousands and thousands of people who are pushing in the background to make sure that we've got an election. And also look at it this way. How much did it cost us to stage this election? The last one, the IEBC had a budget of close to 40 billion shillings.
40 billion shillings?
We have to do another election because of the carelessness of a few people. And nurses are on strike.
Yeah.
Doctors
we could have used that money to sort
Thank
doctors,
you.
teachers,
Yes.
all
And
combined.
You know, what greater burden or stupidity could there be for us to go back into elections with people who have cost us so much?
You know, Mheshimiwa brings up a very interesting perspective. And there's also another side to it. You can imagine the effort of all the over thousands of employees of IEBC who have to do it over again because their job was frustrated and impeached by a few guys sitting somewhere in an office. I mean, surely.
Is there a need to do a full audit of the KIMS systems, the technology bit of, because let us say Chiloba has gone, and if we are just going to go into an election without having a proper audit, are we not likely to run into the same problems? I remember one of the lawyers in court said that it is practically impossible to do another election without such errors. So is there a need to do an entire systems audit?
Definitely. One of the things that we must insist on is that before the 26th of October, we must look at the systems and be sure that they are robust. We must look at the systems and ensure that the ICT regulations that are attached to the Elections Act, the systems at IEBC are confidential, they've got integrity, they've got availability, which is usually called the trinity of robust systems. That must be looked into. We must also be very sure that the D-Chirchirs of this world are not going to get a backdoor to get into the system and commit treasonable acts.
But, I mean, you've called out for IEBC. I mean, you're not calling out for any action to be taken against Chirchir. He's supposed to be a cabinet secretary, isn't it?
No. He was dropped over
disgracefully over
issues of misconduct.
integrity.
So there's that history. Yes.
We are assuming that the Chirchir we are talking about is the same one. I don't know because there could be legal implications.
Yes, that's what I wanted to clarify.
But remember, at the start of this discussion, we said there were 2 smoking guns that Orengo presented to the court, and IEBC and Jubilee were very quick. In fact, they sprang to their feet very quickly when they realized the implication of the additional evidence that Orengo was going to present.
I want to ask you as an IT expert, what is the possibility of cloning or building a parallel virtual system like the IEBC has?
Very easy.
And have it interfere with that system?
Very, very easy. I mean, virtualization is a concept that has been there in technology for a long time now. Creating a virtual machine, there are many tools, open source tools and proprietary tools. As a tech guy, take me to a server room, give me a list of all the servers, and I can be able to create a virtual machine that replicates what those other machines are doing. Such that you can have a situation where Kenyans are voting, but there's a display at Bomas that is showing data linked to a totally different system. And
away from the KIMS devices
Yes, we think that this is what happened. That what we were seeing at Bomas was not mining data from the real database. This was picking data from a separate system that had been infiltrated and had been affected and influenced by...
Yeah, but because what Kenyans are asking is, look, assume this is my KIMS device. I have scanned this Form 34A and I have sent it. So what's the big deal after that?
Yes, it hits the server, lands into a folder, and then someone deletes it and uploads another form, which
is coming from this other virtual...
Yes. Guys were sitting in River Road and all sorts of places.
Absolutely.
Forms,
and you know,
filling forms
there were 2 specific orders of a court that they vehemently refused to comply with. Number 1, there was an order of the court that they supply the petitioner with GPS data of all the KIMS kits that were used in this particular election, so that you could be able to say that where, for instance, this KIMS kit number, device this and this, was actually used to upload the form from Kibera
From
Primary.
this particular point.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And the second one is they refused to allow access to their database so that we could be able to see what Mheshimiwa is talking about, that at a certain point, so-and-so logged in using the following credentials and was able to perform the following functions, whether it is a deletion or an addition or a rectification, whatever it is. So in the eye of the defiance of those two court orders, what Mheshimiwa is talking about is absolutely credible. And that's why we are looking at all these elections to be able to find out what happened.
The third order they defied, Edu, if you remember, there was a very specific instruction that they must provide access to the transmitted forms.
Yes.
Transmitted forms, leave alone the forms that were already in Nairobi. The transmitted forms. To provide evidence that what we're dealing with is what originated from the King's devices. They did not do that.
Just a quick one. Kelvin DNG, following with keen interest from Windhoek, Namibia, as a Pan-Africanism optimist. And he says, TBIM. It's TBIM thing.
It's now global.
It's now global. it's in Windhoek now. Moving forward, how do you secure this? I mean, do you need minimum reforms? Say, for example, so that if you say they did not comply to give, for example, the GPRS for their devices, moving forward, how do we mitigate that? So that then we are not because I'm looking at a situation where we might go for an election and then get ourselves back to Supreme Court. And then it can be a permanent cycle.
That's why we are saying, Baggy, you know, technology, it's hard to fault technology. It is the human element in the interface with technology that we are addressing. I mean, in the run-up to these elections, there was one side that was committed in ensuring that we actually had a free and fair election. So you saw us going to court to address every single concern. And we were actually ridiculed because we were following the law to get proper interpretations.
Yeah, there was talk that NASA has been permanently
and there was another side. There was another side which was going around the country saying, they told the Kambas in Kambaland, we don't need your votes, we will still win this election. So you could see that there was one divide of a political divide that was interested in having a free and fair election. The other ones were not interested. So if we do not sort out the human element, that we get rid of these people who have been enablers of the vile characters in our politics to hack our systems and to ensure that they subvert the will of the people, then we are doing nothing. Which is why we are starting with Ezra.
Well, Mike is saying, please start doing news at 9 and 7. Brown envelope media is hiding a lot from Kenya. I don't know if there's brown envelope media or what he's
referring to.
Yeah, or what is referring.
Tell him not to fear. He can name names.
I just guess that perhaps there's information that is coming from this conversation that is not precisely out there.
Very true. There's a lot that we've seen in the past few weeks. There's a lot that we've seen that is going wrong in this country. There's a lot that Kenyans need to know. And Kenyans need to know that in the first round, NASA won the election. And I like the way Edu puts it, there are people who have committed treason by trying to change the will of the people using technology and through the back door. And you asked going forward. I think for me, our focus should be on turning out the way we turned out and making sure that we vote, because the first time we won and the second time we know we can win. In the meantime, as our people rally to go out and vote, we will be ensuring that the thugs who are committing treason are not allowed anywhere close to the electoral process. We will ensure that the systems retain or maintain their confidentiality and integrity so that we can have an election that reflects the will of Kenya.
If the servers were open, Mheshimiwa Sifuna,
yes,
and if you're saying that Raila Odinga won the election, if that was evident to the Supreme Court, would there have been an option of him being declared president?
Absolutely. In fact, I saw one of them, I don't know if it is Uhuru or Ruto, crying that there was a coup by the court, yet the court did not install anyone as president. I mean, how is there a coup when there's no one who's taken over the reins of power? And it is an option, actually, because if the logs had been opened, it would have been easy for us as the legal team to demonstrate the actual numbers, which they kept saying about in court.
Yeah.
That we would have transcended the argument from just the process, which we made very strenuously, to now demonstrate how it actually affected numbers by saying we took figure X from here and put figure Y. Here. And that we can actually do a retally using the correct figures in the forms that Mheshimiwa is talking about, the actual forms that were uploaded, and we arrive at a figure and declare Raila Odinga president.
Mheshimiwa, what does this ruling mean for the other positions? You know, both of you were supposed to be senators, so to speak.
Yes.
You are sworn in, and you are not sworn in. So, I mean, do we look at this process in its entirety as flawed? Were there sections of it that were flawed?
We should look at the other positions as well. The window for petitions on the other positions is open now. Yeah. And I know in the course of this week, and I expect that Edu will also go to court to challenge the victory of Jubilee, because I believe that Jubilee hatched the Farangas in Nairobi through this manipulation.
Absolutely.
In the Supreme Court, it had jurisdiction on the presidential election. And the Form 34A, B, and C's were forms that were used to capture the presidential results. We now need to start looking at the Form 35s. That
35s are the ones that affect the
used
senators
for the other positions. And these need to be looked at across the board. In places like Nairobi, I believe that there was foul play.
What I can tell you,
are you going to court?
What I can tell you is this. We have a wonderful team of young people, the IT experts who are with us at IEBC.
Yes.
Those guys will be celebrated for quite a long time. We have a team that was led also by Dr. Nyangasi Oduo, young people who looked at every single of the 40,000 forms and enabled us to have this victory. And they have also identified for us 70 specific seats.
Wow.
Which is
70?
Absolutely, which Jubilee had interest. And unfortunately, one of those was the Senate in Nairobi. Yes.
Okay.
So we will meet that Kifaranga in court.
Wagga Wagga is saying, really tell us what happened to our votes in Kajiado County. They changed everything. We in Kajiado want change, but not 54% Vifaranga. I mean, these words you politicians use. Catch on. Catch on very quickly.
Yeah.
We are wrapping up. Mheshimiwa Moses Kajwang, your final remarks.
What Justice Maraga and the Supreme Court has done to Kenya is, I mean, it's like a stage of liberation. We have been very much obsessed with outcomes in this country.
Yes.
And I mentioned this even yesterday when I was having a debate with Murkomen, that Kenya is a country where someone is suddenly rich and we love him and we appreciate him. We don't care how he got there. And what Maraga has told us through this ruling, that whatever it is you turn out to be, you can be, but it must be with fidelity to the Constitution and respect the rule of law and the fear of God.
Above all.
That is a huge paradigm shift. And you know, Baggy, if we had leaders who think about those three dimensions, even if you became president of Kenya, I would not be worried.
Oh, amen. Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good thought you have of me.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa, as your closing remarks come on, somebody's asking, lawyers, both of you are lawyers, where do you draw the line on who to support? I mean, where do you draw the patriotic line and the business line? There are particular lawyers that perhaps people didn't expect to act or for on behalf of IEBC or particular clients.
Two things. Number one, as a lawyer, you are sworn to hold fidelity to the law so that it doesn't matter who it is, just the way that Mheshimiwa Kajwang has said.
Yes.
You stand there to explain what the law as you understand it is. And you stand in fidelity with the law. Number two, as a lawyer, you are not given a choice on who to represent. There's something called the cab rank rule, that whoever shows up at your door asking for your services, you have, you know, an obligation to represent them, but you could excuse yourself on various grounds. I mean, if there's conflict of interest, your moral fiber will not allow you, or the things. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which you can get out of it. So we don't blame the lawyers who represented the petition, the respondents in court. What we actually criticize is their arguments in that particular court, because you're supposed to help our democracy to grow and our constitution to grow and our law to grow. My final parting words, Baggy. We have a responsibility. You see, Justice Maraga has done his job in terms of standing up for the constitution and the rule of law in this country. We have to return the favor by now protecting that constitution at the ballot and getting rid of these people who would have us under a system of tyranny and fear out of State House, and to banish them completely so that no one who does not have credentials in respect of law should ever ascend to that office in this land.
In fact, the Maraga revolution would be a stillborn if Jubilee returns to
Absolutely.
Wow, very well. I'll just go through 2 quick comments. Daddy V, Muziki, I'm watching closely from Dallas, Texas. I hope you're safe. I mean, I had the floods over there. Let us not repeat elections with the same IEBC. Kindly inform people that IEBC is not only Chebukati or Chiloba. There are various other individuals out there. We hear you. Noela, Inyundele Noela. Each person that was involved in the rigging should be accountable. Very well. Thank you very much for watching. This is Opinion 2017. Be blessed and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Senator Tarajiwa. Amareni ule amekalia aliyesimamia.